Hi, in this recording I'll show you how to install the Oracle Enterprise Database on a newer Fedora system, Fedora 20. This will correspond to a RedHat 6. I am on the oracle.com website. You will find the downloadable files under the tab, and I will actually install the 11G database release 2, so 11GR2, and I am working with these two downloaded files. So Linux 64-bit. Okay, so what I have downloaded are the two Oracle zip files. I also have the Fedora ISO, and I use the VirtualBox as the infrastructure for my operating system. Okay, so from here there are a few tricks that you have to use on a newer Fedora system. The first one being you have to modify the RedHat release file, mark it as RedHat release 5. Also, you'll have to install additional packages, which the installer prompts you to do that. And if you are following directions online from either Oracle or some other DBA, you will see a list of utilities that need to be installed. The problem on a newer Fedora system is that the versions of these are higher than what the installer recognizes as valid. So what you'll have to do is go ahead and run the installations and then ignore the prerequisite checks. The second part, there is a mod that's necessary in the code that is going to be compiled, and so you will need these two additional packages, the glib, both 64 and 32-bit, and this will come into place when you get the first error during the installation process. So there are two files that you'll have to modify and then try again. The two files are this ins emagent.make and the ens CTXHX. So these are two programs, the Enterprise Agent and the CTX. And in the first one, in the CTX, you're going to look for this line, CTXHX, and add the dash static followed by the 64-bit library at the end. Save the file, and then in the emagent file, you're going to actually look for make emagent statement followed by nmetgctl, and you will add here dash lnnz11. So when you read this on the web page, oftentimes the ones looks like L's, so the last two are ones and the first one is an L. Okay, with this code modified, you're ready to run the installation, so we'll go ahead and run the Oracle installer. A couple of other things that I've done here is in order to meet the swap requirements of the installer, you can see I have 10 gig of swap here. I actually created an additional file in addition to my partition swap. I only have 2 gig of partition swap. This is a development virtual system. If I'm filling up more than 2 gig of swap, nothing's going to work anyway. But for the installation portion, I actually created the swap file. I enabled it so that way it looks like I have a lot of swap available. Okay, so from here I will go ahead and go next. I will uncheck communication with the cloud Oracle system. Creating it and configuring the database is exactly what I'm looking for. And let me make this a little bigger yet. Okay, desktop class, no, I'm looking for the server class software. We're looking for a single database installation instead of the rack. Advanced install, what I'd like to have. And English is fine. Enterprise Edition, that looks good. And next, here are some of the defaults that I will accept for the Oracle Home. Now I also filled out these defaults in my Oracle Bash profile, and so you can see here that I completed this profile with some basic information which will help my database to start up correctly next time I do this by hand. Alright, so let's go next. That's fine, and let's go next. Okay, so I ran this installer before, so what I'll need to do is I need to go back to my inventory location and remove it. Let's go ahead and do that. Oracle inventory. Alright, so now if we go next, we'll go ahead and continue. We'd like to have a transactional database. The name of the database is fine. 3 gig of memory is good. We're going to adjust it later on if needed. And my application actually requires a different character set, so we will look for the Unicode UTF-8. AL32 UTF-8 is fine. It'll support a variety of characters, not just the English language. The security and sample schemas unchecked is correct. We'll skip the email notifications, go next. The location of the data files is fine. No backups at this time. And we'll set, it's a development service, so I can set the same password for all those accounts. And we'll go next with that. And that's okay. And if you're following directions on a web page, either from Oracle or somewhere else, you might have a different role here, perhaps a DBA role. So whatever it is that you've selected to track these administrators, you go ahead and use that. Okay, and now we reach the key area of this installation, and that is the prerequisite check. Because we're using a newer version of the operating system, then the installer is actually looking for the older package versions, and it's marking all of them as failed. Now, the first time you arrived at this, you might have more checks that are failing, and you will have to correct them. So you have to install all these packages in the first place. Now I'll demonstrate an example here. Package lib AIO, so asynchronous input-output. Let's say we are doing a little search for this package on my system, and you can see that I have this package. I also have the sources for it, and it is of version 109. Whereas the installer is looking for 105. So we have the software, we're okay. It is now safe to go ahead and ignore it all. I also have some of these kernel parameters reset to non-standard, so I'm comfortable saying yes to them. Again, you best fixing them ahead of time, and sometimes you can do that by simply pointing. See when it says fixable here, you can point to the kernel option and then say fix check again. It'll create a little script in the temp folder, and then you can execute from there. Speaking of the temp folder, an important issue here on a newer RedHat / Fedora system. Let me go back to the Bash profile. See, I specified here my own temp location. Okay, and you can see this is not /tmp. The newer Fedora systems are using optimized temp space that's connected directly to memory, which means that it's actually limited in space, and your installation will fail at some point because of that. So if you point your temp into some file system location, okay, technically the installation will run slightly slower, but it will be successful at the end. Okay, so with this in place, we'll ignore these checks, say next, and looks good, finish. So now as the installation is running, it's going to take a while, and later on we'll go through the database configuration and finally run the root script and eventually launch our database. Thank you.